Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Essay. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei fall in love with Kantai? Part 2. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. My name is Kaga Yamamoto, the side ponytailed girl clad in Kuo Academy uniform, introduced herself to the class. Her tone was calm, and her expression was indiscernible. The first thing most students in the class thought upon seeing the girl was that she somehow carried the aura of a cool lady. "I am pleased to make you acquaintances," she said as she dipped into a slight bow. "Whoa, she's pretty. She looks so cool. Side ponytail, huh? Well, she definitely pulls it off, that's for certain. First, Yamato-chan, and now, her. I think I'm living in an anime. Dude, I think I saw her coming to school together early this morning with Hyoudou. That would mean." All eyes were directed at Issei, who sheepishly looked away upon receiving those looks from his classmates. He believed that he also somehow received some glares from the boys in the class. And it was noteworthy to mention that his fellow perverts, Mitsuda and Motohama, were shooting daggers at him. If looks could kill, he might have been riddled with countless daggers all over his body. Issei Motohama's glare intensified. First, Yamato-chan, and now. Well, Issei glanced around nervously. And to make the situation much worse, Kaga spoke further, and I shall mention that I am currently living in Hyoudou residence. Due to some complicated matters, I am living together with Issei Hyoudou. There was a faint shade of red on Kaga's cheeks as she continued, and I would say that I am not displeased with this current arrangement. Issei gulped, noticing that he was no longer showered in figurative daggers from the glares that he received from the other boys, but instead, he felt like he might have been showered in figurative swords, spears, arrows or any sharp weapons larger than daggers. 2 desks away from him, Yamato was giving Issei a concerned look. 2 days ago, upon her materialization, there was a shift of reality to accommodate Kaga's existence. But unlike Yamato, who had been living together with Issei as a ship's shard for 10 years, the shift of reality wasn't as precise as Yamato's. As a result, the only thing Kaga got from the shift of reality was her civilian identity, Kaga Yamamoto. That was why she had to be introduced to Issei's parents first, because the shift of reality didn't make her Issei's cousin, unlike Yamato. Issei told his parents that Kaga's parents were going overseas due to their works, leaving their daughter alone. He managed to convince his parents to let Kaga to live with them for the time being. Much to his relief, both of them agreed to let her stay with them. And Kaga also needed to attend school, so unlike Yamato, she took the entrance test so that she could attend Kuo Academy. Amazingly, she managed to pass the test with flying colors. All she needed in order to pass the test was to study for only one night. When Issei asked her about how she managed to pass the test, which, from his experience, was super hard and he barely passed the test when he took it, Kaga told him that it was one of the perks of being a non-human creature that was born from the spirit of a sunken World War II-era warship. For Issei, that was quite a nonsensical answer, but that's the only answer he got from her, so he believed that had to be the best answer she could provide to him. She also told him that it was due to her pride of first Cardiff, whatever that actually meant. One thing that Issei realized after having both Yamato and Kaga in the household was that they were a couple of big eaters. Saying that they ate a lot was an understatement of the century. Luckily, both of his parents didn't seem to mind that both girls had exceptionally large appetite, saying that girls nowadays still needed some growing up to do. Issei wanted to say something about that line of thought, considering that both girls were heavily stacked, for the lack of better words, but he figured out that it's better for him to keep whatever he wanted to say about such line of thought to himself. After all, there's no use complaining about why his parents didn't say anything about both girls' abnormal appetite, now that he had 2 girls living together with him, something that he could only dream before. It helped that each of those girls had a pair of large oppi. He also had discussed with both Yamato and Kaga about the next thing to do. Now that he had the embodiments of the spirits of battleship Yamato and aircraft carrier Kaga, the next thing to do would be to provide essential resources for both of them. While both Yamato and Kaga were humanoid in appearance, they were first and foremost the embodiments of Japanese warships and also the yokai that were born from the wills of the ships. Resources such as steel and fuel were essential for the Kanmusu. It's not like they mandatorily needed them, but by consuming them, they would grow much stronger, which would make it easier for him to achieve his dream, collecting shipgirls to make his own harem. Back at the classroom, Issei was grinning lecherously while sitting at his desk, imagining himself being surrounded by his harem that consisted of the shipgirls. Finally, a real-life harem. The one thing that he previously thought as mere dream could finally come true. Like Yamato, Kaga also agreed to help him to achieve his dream of making a harem of Kanmusu. And she was also willing to use her powers to search for more ship fragments in order to awaken more shipgirls. As a personification of an aircraft carrier, she could use her reconnaissance planes, which were shaped like toy planes, by the way, to track down the fragments. She had assumed that within 1 week, the planes would be able to detect at least 7 fragments across the country, and the planes would retrieve the fragments to their place so that the summoning ritual could be made. The usage of her planes also somehow increased Kaga's appetite, and the night after Kaga launched her planes, she almost single-handedly demolished the dinner. Due to some reasons, Issei's mother didn't suspect even a thing, thinking that it might be just a phase. So, back at the classroom, Kaga had finished her introduction, her expression seemed calm and deadpan as ever. The majority of the boys were still casting evil glares at Issei when the teacher told Kaga, "So, Yamamoto-san, you can take any empty seat you like." Blinking, Kaga scanned the whole class, looking at her classmates before she raised her hand and pointed her finger at the empty desk which somehow was conveniently beside Issei's. "I'd like to sit there," Kaga said. "I'd like to sit beside Issei-kun." Some of her classmates were murmuring. "Isn't that Satama-kun's seat? I heard he crashed into a tree yesterday. He got a full body cast at the hospital. Poor guy." "Well, at least we won't be worrying about his desk being empty. You do know what they say about empty desks, right?" "Oh, is this one of your horror stories again? Hey, this one is real. Don't you know that one time, the toilet?" Issei sighed, ignoring the conversation between his classmates that somehow had mutated into something about the school's bathrooms. He seemed to be thinking about something when Kaga went to the empty desk beside his before she took her seat. Meanwhile, Yamato was giving Issei a worried look. "Issei." Kaneko Taoju was feeling a little nervous since the morning. When she arrived at school at the morning, she detected a scent which reminded her of Yamato, the mysterious girl who showed up at school a few days ago. She could tell that the girl was anything but a human. What made her nervous was that while the scent seemed familiar, it wasn't the same as the one that came from Yamato. This time, this scent was a little stronger, and it reminded her of seawater. After that, she saw her, a different girl who walked alongside Issei Hyoudou. Yamato also walked beside him. This new girl was shorter than Yamato, and she wore her dark brown hair in side ponytail. Seeing her expression reminded Kaneko of herself, stoic and composed. "Whoa, who's that beauty? I never saw her before. Dang, she's pretty." Eyes Hyoudou walking with her. And with Yamato-chan too. "Damn you Hyoudou. That bastard's double-wielding. Damn it, God is dead. Dead, I tell ya." Kaneko still remembered the reactions of other students who saw this new girl, who apparently was a new student at Kuo Academy, and she decided to momentarily forget about those for the time being. Judging from the unique scent that she detected from her, Kaneko could tell that she might not be a human, just like Yamato. She remembered the time when she was eavesdropping both Issei and Yamato, recalling some details regarding Yamato's true nature and some other things. She still didn't understand most of the things she heard, but she knew that something was going on. Normally, she would just let it be, considering that supernatural existence was a natural occurrence around the area, particularly at Kuo Academy. She was of supernatural existence herself, so she shouldn't be surprised if she discovered something inhuman among the crowd. And yet there was something that had been bothering her. It was something that she was unable to explain with words. Because of that, she went to tell the president of the Occult Research Club, Rias Gremory, regarding this matter. "So, that explains why you seemed restless these last few days," Rias Gremory said, looking at Kaneko, who was sitting on the sofa opposite the one she was sitting on. The white-haired petite girl was drinking a cup of tea. She had told her about her discovery. The busty, black-haired girl, Akeno Himejima, the vice president of the club, was pouring tea into cups when she said, "My, so it's not because of Kaneko-chan being in heat, after all." The black-haired beauty smiled teasingly at the younger girl. "You?" And the poor girl ended up spitting the tea she was drinking, and being the one who was in front of her when she did the rather spectacular spy take, Rias found herself dripping with tea. Letting out an annoyed sigh, she glanced at Akeno. "What did I tell you about saying things like that, Akeno?" She didn't seem to be bothered in her current state of wetness as she threw the black-haired girl a disapproving look. Kaneko, who was coughing after doing a spy take, seemed to have the decency to be embarrassed after splashing the tea she was drinking right onto Ria's face. The only boy in the clubhouse, Hyoudou Kiba, went to Ria's side before he handed her a fresh clean towel so that she could wipe herself dry with it. "Ah, thank you Hyoudou. You're welcome but you." While Rias was using the towel to wipe herself dry, Kaneko set down her teacup. "So you somehow encountered 2 unknown supernatural entities showing up at school these last few days?" Rias began. "Not encountered," Kaneko said before she took a rice cracker on the place that was on the table. "Detected." After taking a bite, she continued, "I detected them by chance, and they smelled strange." Rias understood what Kaneko was trying to tell her. Due to her special circumstances, Kaneko was able to discern the nature of supernatural beings by their sense. And this time, she somehow detected something that was unknown to her. "So," Akeno said as she read the documents in her hands. Yamato Hyoudou and Kaga Yamamoto. She was reading the information of these 2 new students. Yamato Hyoudou came to this school a few days ago, and Kaga Yamamoto came 2 days later, which is today. she eyed the petite girl. Are you saying that these two are some kind of entities that are unknown to us? Kaneko nodded. Yes. She never smelled such scents before, not from the supernatural entities that she already knew beforehand. And I eavesdropped their conversation a few days ago. I was unable to learn what they were talking about, but I did hear Yamato Hyoudou's words about her being a non-human. After a pause, she added, and I also saw her summoning some kind of small creatures. Maria's brought her hand to her chin, mulling over the new information she received from the younger girl. Kaneko, will you continue observing these two? Use your familiar if necessary. Also, since Issei Hyoudou is also with him, will you observe him too? Maria's clasped her hands together as she looked at Kaneko. If we are right, then he may have it in him, the red-haired girl said. The sacred gear. Kaneko nodded. Understood. Admiral, is something bothering you? Yamato asked Issei as she walked alongside the boy on their way home. Kaga was also with them. After school, they decided to go straight home to check the progress of the reconnaissance planes to see if they managed to find the signals of the ship fragments. Issei blinked before he looked at the ponytailed girl beside him. Oh no, it's nothing, Issei said. Yamato could tell that Issei was definitely troubled. Admiral Kaga spoke from his side. You look troubled. I'm fine, Issei insisted. Yamato and Kaga looked at each other. Both shipgirls were befuddled by Issei's change of behavior. When they thought about it, he started getting fidgety sometimes after Kaga's materialization. Well, if you say so, Yamato said, smiling warmly at Issei. That beautiful smile of hers was definitely a sight to behold for Issei. So, as they walked the street, there was a girl walking opposite their direction. She seemed to be holding a paper bag which contained a lot of meat buns, and the girl was eating one while walking towards their direction. And Kaga almost bumped into her. Sorry. The girl apologized after swallowing the chunk of meat bun she had bitten. It's okay, Kaga said. After bowing, the girl walked away. When Kaga was about to continue walking, she saw something on the ground. It was a cell phone, which was pink in color. She bent down and picked it up. She figured out that this cell phone might belong to the girl she almost bumped into earlier. Without wasting any second, she turned on her heel and walked over to the girl's direction. Wait, Kaga called out for that girl, and the girl stopped. You dropped this. She held out the cell phone to the girl. When she stood before her, she managed to take a good look at her. They were about the same height, from what she could tell. She was attired in light pink dress, and she was also wearing a pair of white sandals. The girl's hair was long, and like hers, the girl's hair was also dark brown in color, almost black. The girl looked at the pink cell phone that Kaga showed her before she smiled, taking the cell phone from the other girl. Thank you. Sorry for the trouble. It's okay, Kaga said. The girl took the phone from her before Kaga realized that there was an anchor-shaped phone strap attached on the cell phone. Then Kaga looked at the girl. She was wearing a black choker with a miniature anchor on it. Do I know you? The girl suddenly asked. Kaga blinked a few times. Well, probably it's just me, the girl mused. Oh well, thanks for giving this back. My dad was the one who bought this, you know. The girl giggled. Oh, that sounds nice, Kaga said. Then she realized that both Yamato and Issei were waiting for her. I should go now. Have a good day. And so, she left the girl and joined both Yamato and Issei. The girl remained there, staring at the cell phone that was returned to her after she dropped it. Absent-mindedly, she took out another meat bun from the paper bag that she held before she took a bite. It's been a long time, she spoke. Finally, after midway, we meet again, Kaga. The girl turned around and walked down the street, presumably towards the direction of her house. Issei had been lying to both Yamato and Kaga. He was indeed very troubled about something. It was after the encounter with the corrupted form of Kaga at the warehouse some days ago. From what he had learned, an abyssal is born due to accumulated grudges and hatred within a ship after being sunken. Due to the outcome of the war, Issei figured out that most, if not all warships, might end up materializing themselves as abyssals due to them being sunken during the war. Kaga got it worse due to her being sunken in one of the most humiliating defeats for Imperial Japanese Navy, the Battle of Midway. Yamato managed to get off easy due to her fame and reputation as national icon, as well as due to the fact that she had been living with Issei for 10 years in her fragment form. Yamato had explained that once an abyssal is born, she becomes the manifestation of the shipgirl's grudges. It could be said that he was lucky that he managed to purify Kaga's corrupted form by calming her down, but there was no guarantee that it could work to other corrupted shipgirls. Issei recalled the time when he saw the visions of Kaga, alone and broken, at the bottom of the sea. He could tell that she was scared, being left alone in the cold sea, right after being sunken during the most humiliating defeat in the history of naval warfare. If that was what Kaga experienced when she was sunken, what about the other ships? Were they scared too? He had read about the Battle of Midway before. 4 aircraft carriers and 1 heavy cruiser were sunk. Including Kaga, other warships such as Akagi, Hyoudou, Soryu and Mikuma were lost during the battle. If Kaga suffered due to her defeat, did the same happen to them too? Did they spend all these years accumulating grudges in their watery graves deep within the Pacific Ocean, far from the motherland where they were born? Issei still could remember what he had heard at that time, when Kaga said how scared she was at that time. He seemed to have trouble getting rid of those images of hers, lying motionlessly on the seabed, cold and alone. Did the others also suffer the same thing too? He had been wondering about such thing for quite a while, and it hurt his head. So, he figured out that he might need some fresh air outside. "I'm going out now," Issei said after putting on his jacket to protect himself from the night air. "Shall I accompany you, Admiral?" Kaga asked. Issei smiled and shook his head. "Nah, no worries, Kaga-chan. I'm going out to get some fresh air, that's all." "Very well," Kaga nodded. "Please be safe." So, Issei went out of the house, putting his hands into the pockets of his jacket as he walked down the street. As he walked, he started thinking about his dream about making a harem of shipgirls. Is this alright? After his encounter with the corrupted Kaga, he began to rethink about his dream. All the shipgirls might have suffered in one way or another thanks to the war, and here he thought that it would be okay to collect them all like collectible trading cards. Well, the shipgirls aren't humans, they are still people with feelings and emotions. It's definitely awesome to have a harem, but is it alright to go around collecting them like some collectible items? He had realized how selfish his dream was after his encounter with Kaga. He wanted to collect shipgirls who happened to be the personifications of the warships that were sunken during the wars many years ago. Kaga-chan was so scared she even became a monster because of it. Is it alright if I seek out the others if they're as scared as Kaga-chan when they were sunken? Issei stopped walking when he arrived at the park. It was already late at night, so there was no one around him. He brought his hand to his chest, touching the talisman that was hanging on his neck. "Grandpa, what should I do?" "I don't know what to do." Slowly, Issei walked over to a jungle gym in the middle of the park and leaned himself against it. He shuddered slightly as the back of his neck touched the cold surface of the metal bar of the jungle gym. Then, he sighed. "Erg, what is wrong with me? I never felt this confused before." Issei wanted to scream in frustration over the things that had been bothering him for the last few days. Then, a voice spoke to him. "Well, you definitely look troubled." Huh? He looked up and saw someone sitting on top of the jungle gym. It was a girl, clad in light pink dress. Because it was nighttime, he couldn't tell whether her long, silky hair was black or dark brown, but there was one thing he was certain, she was definitely pretty. In one hand, she was holding a paper bag which seemed to contain some croissants, and the way she was sitting on the jungle gym somehow exposed her panties. Why, Issei gasped out in amazement. He had seen panty shots before, but it was his first time seeing one so close. It was definitely a sight to be admired for a pervert like him. The girl noticed that Issei saw her undergarment and she immediately closed her legs in order to cover her panties. Pervert, she blushed a little, but somehow, she was smiling. "Alright, I'm going to jump down. Cushion my fall, K. Wah, Geronimo." Whap. The girl jumped onto him and without thinking, Issei used his body in order to cushion her fall. Her body made full contact with his and he was able to feel her breasts being pressed against his torso. Whoa, the relapai. Wait, she's not wearing bra. Oh, lying on top of Issei, the girl looked down to see her impromptu cushion before she smiled. "Thanks. You're a real help. As a reward, have a croissant." She handed Issei a croissant. Taking the crescent-shaped pastry from the strange girl, Issei stared at her as the girl got up from him before she continued eating her croissants. He also got up and absent-mindedly took a bite on the croissant that was given by the girl. Issei tried to say something to the girl, but was unable to find any right words. Noticing the boy's discomfort, the girl finished her croissants quickly. Issei had no idea how she managed to demolish all those croissants in mere seconds. Before she spoke, "What brings you to the park in the middle of the night?" "Well," Issei said. "I guess I'm out to take some fresh air." "Ah, I see," she mused. "But, I can see that you're definitely troubled." She folded her arms under her breasts as she looked at the boy. "Care to share about the things that have been troubling you with a stranger who ate croissants in the middle of the night?" Issei looked at the strange girl. She smiled at him kindly. Well, you see, I actually have this dream, an ambition of sorts," Issei began. "Then, something happened and I began to see that my dream is," Issei scratched the back of his head. "Kinda selfish." "Selfish?" The girl raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, selfish. I think my dream kinda involves taking advantage of people who are suffering," Issei said as he looked down. "If anything, I want to help them to stop their suffering, but it feels like I'm taking advantage of them." Stroking her chin, the girl spoke. "So, you want to achieve your dream, but you don't want to hurt those people while trying to achieve your dream." She tilted her head cutely. "What's your dream?" Grinning, Issei made a dramatic pose. "I'm gonna be the harem king." Then he nervously laughed as he lowered his hands. "Oh yeah." The girl blinked a few times, in fact. "Well, that's definitely quite a big dream, I'd say," she said. And those people are girls who you want to put into your harem, but you think that putting them into your harem without considering their feelings is kinda selfish of you. Is that right? Yeah, it kinda feels that way, Issei nodded sheepishly. These people, they suffered a lot. And if I treat them like some kind of collectible trading cards, they're gonna hurt more. He brought his hands to his head. I saw her there, all alone. I don't wanna hurt them. I see, the girl mused. Well, I can understand what you mean. She brought her hands up to take Issei's, holding them. Issei could feel how soft those hands were. Still, there has to be some way for you to realize your dream without hurting anyone. She smiled warmly at the boy. In fact, I think I know how to do that. You do? Issei said. What is it? You told me that those people suffered a lot, so why don't you try to ease their burden? The girl suggested. Help them. Find a way to make sure that they will suffer no more. Relieve them of their own suffering. Then, she winked. Just change the priority. Make helping them the highest on your list of priorities and make a harem the second highest. Highest priority? Issei blinked. The girl's expression became serious. Do you want to help them? Do you want to save them from their suffering? Would you pull them out of the abyss of despair? Issei was stunned upon hearing those questions. But he composed himself and answered those questions. Yes, he nodded. I don't want them to suffer. Her expression softened. There you go. Just make it your highest priority. But what about my dream? Issei asked. Believe me, it'll come naturally, the girl shrugged. Issei didn't understand what she meant. Well, if you say so. Since the girl had reassured him that in one way or another, that dream would eventually be realized, there would be no need for him to worry anymore. And thanks. You're welcome. The girl responded. So, my Issei. Issei Hyoudou. The boy grinned before he held out his hand. What's your name? Smiling gently, the girl spoke her name. My name is Akagi. The girl tilted her head. I guess you can call me Akagi, then. I'm home. Welcome back, Admiral. Issei entered his house and was welcomed by Kaga, who was dressed in plain white shirt and a pair of black shorts. Her side ponytail was undone and her dark brown hair was a little wet. Issei assumed that she had taken a bath earlier. As Issei looked at the personification of aircraft carrier Kaga before him, he couldn't help himself as he focused on her chest. Noticing this, Kaga blinked a few times, noting that the boy was looking at her breasts intently. Being recently reincarnated into her humanoid form, she had yet to understand the significance of her body parts, besides some rudimentary knowledge about them. Is something the matter, Admiral? Kaga asked. Is there something wrong with my breasts? When she asked that question, she cupped her breasts with her hands. Seeing Kaga's mountainous assets being handled in such an erotic way, Issei's jaw hung open and his eyes widened. It took the entirety of his willpower to rein himself before he coughed into his fist, clearing his throat. It's nothing. I think I'm gonna take a bath first. See ya. So, Issei hurriedly left Kaga alone near the door. Bemused, Kaga blinked a few times before she looked at the door. She put on a pair of sandals and opened the door, stepping out of the house. I never thought it was you, Kaga spoke softly as she stepped out of the house. Leaning against a nearby lamppost, there was a girl with long hair, clad in light pink dress. When Kaga saw her, the girl smiled and tilted her head slightly. It's been a long time since Midway, Kaga said as she held out her hand before a miniature plane descended from above, landing on her palm. The plane then disappeared in a poof, leaving behind a fairy who also then disappeared in a small explosion after giving Kaga a salute. I am glad to meet you once again, Kaga, the girl said. I can see that you have your own admiral, she giggled. Quite an alright person, I'd say. He's surprisingly quite a softie, you know. A little bit of a perv though, but I don't really mind. She winked. Akagi, Kaga said the name of the girl. I do appreciate you looking after him while he's going out a while ago, but how did you manage to gain this form? She stepped closer to Akagi, studying her. And how did you manage to live without the corruption? As far as I can tell, both of us are the victims of Midway. Our grudge has yet to be fully dissolved. About that, Akagi tapped her chin a few times. I've been around in this form for quite a while. It's been almost a year since I gained this form. I was adopted by a family of beast tamer, she chuckled after saying that. Well, technically, we are yokai. I don't think it's weird if we are treated like beasts by those people. Still, they treated me like a family member, she grinned. I also got in One-chan too. She taught me how to play tennis. I see. There was a relieved smile on Kaga's face. I'm glad, Akagi. You are having a good life. Then, Akagi looked down. Still, like you said, the corruption is still inside me. My grudge has yet to be fully dissolved. To prove her point, her body flickered a bit and her hair and complexion turned white for a few seconds before turning back to normal. I assume it's the same to you too, Kaga. In order to keep our sanity intact, we need to periodically cleanse ourselves. Kaga looked at Akagi, knowing what the other girl was talking about. Even though they were purified, they still could remember their devastating defeat during the Battle of Midway, and it was the source of their grudge. The accumulated grudge would then corrupt them again, causing them to relapse and revert back into their abyssal forms. And when that happened, they wouldn't be able to distinguish between friends and foes, causing them to destroy everything indiscriminately. In case if you need help about this, feel free to ask my help, Akagi offered. Like you, I'm also a student at Kuo Academy. If you want to see me, just drop by a tennis club. I'm sure my Wani-chan will be delighted to see you too. She knows a few things about cleansing methods for us Kanmusu. Kaga nodded. Very well, I shall inform my admiral of this. I'm sure he'll be pleased to hear it, she smiled. Then, she stared at Akagi, and the long-haired Kanmusu blinked and tilted her head. What? Akagi asked. Are you happy? Kaga asked. Are you happy with your current life? Are you happy that you are no longer alone in your watery grave? Akagi smiled softly before she walked over to Kaga's direction, approaching her. Yes, I am happy. The memories of Midway and the years of loneliness still haunt my dreams, but they won't stop me from being happy and fulfilled. I have a family to take care of me, I have a future to look forward, and now she leaned towards Kaga and whispered, I am no longer alone as a Kanmusu. You and Yamato are here now. Akagi Kaga said as Akagi brought her hand to stroke her cheek. Well, I guess I shall get going, then, Akagi said. Take care Kaga. And please look after your admiral too, okay? He'll need all the supports you can give, she said before she walked away, leaving Kaga alone in front of Hyoudou residence. Kaga just remained there even after Akagi had disappeared. Then the door was opened before Yamato stepped out of the house, looking at Kaga, who was still standing motionlessly outside the house. Kaga, why are you still outside? It's cold, she said. Kaga looked over her shoulder and saw Yamato's face. It's nothing. I apologize for making you worry, she said before she turned on her heel and went into the house together with Yamato. A bit strange, Rias mused, sitting on the sofa in the clubroom of Occult Research Club. One of the members of the club, Hyoudou Kiba, was preparing some tea, and when he heard Rias musing, he looked at her and noticed that she was frowning. What's the matter, Butchu? Kiba asked. Did you remember what Kaneko had reported about the inhuman presences that accompanied Issei Hyoudou? Rias asked. About both girls named Yamato Hyoudou and Kaga Yamamoto, I mean. The red-haired girl sighed as she held out the papers she was holding. When Kiba went over to her, serving her a cup of tea, Rias handed the papers to the blonde boy. I've done some investigations regarding these two students, with a little help from Sona. Kiba read the papers that were handed to him. So what did you find out, Butchu? He asked before he studied the contents of the papers. He started to understand what had been bothering the president of the club. There were no previous records regarding their existences. It feels like both of them suddenly showed up out of thin air, Rias said before she took a sip of her tea. Then, she continued, it feels like they suddenly poofed into existence. She put down her cup before she clasped her hands together. And there is another thing that can explain what they actually are. Kiba regarded Rias curiously. And what would it be? He asked. I did mention to you all that I've been studying about Oriental folklores, right? So, I remember reading something about yokai, Rias said. It's been mentioned in the books that I have read that sometimes, a yokai's mere existence can affect the fabric of reality itself. Not too much to the point of altering the laws of nature, of course, but still enough to change people's perception of reality. She held out an index finger as she continued her explanation. That's how yokai usually manage to blend into society without making a fuss, like how yokai like fox demons can disguise themselves into beautiful women and be married with men without being found out. I see what you mean, Butchu Kiba said. Still, that sounds oddly contrived. Are you saying that both Yamato Hyoudou and Kaga Yamamoto are yokai? He asked. Well, wild mass guessing doesn't hurt once in a while, Hyoudou, Rias said. And considering that I've been studying about yokai lately, I'm sticking with this theory until it's proved otherwise. I also came up with other theories too, but I prefer this one. Kiba suppressed the urge to sigh. Every once in a while, the president of the Occult Research Club would show her rather eccentric side. While he didn't hate it, he still wished that he could get used to it, just like Akeno. So, what should we do after this? Kiba asked. Am I going to watch them too? Rias tilted her head and spoke, giving Kaneko a little bit of assistance will be nice, she smiled at the boy. Ever since those two showed up, Kaneko has been quite restless. Like Akeno, she also initially thought that it might have something to do with her being in heat. She did mention that both of them smell weird, just like seawater. Rias brought her left hand to her chin, making a thinking pose. But why seawater? Seawater, huh? Kiba mused. He was unsure about the significance of such thing to the origin of the new students, but he was curious nonetheless. And another thing Rias said. I've been sending out my familiar to scout the areas around the territory, and while there's nothing out of ordinary, there's some sort of strangeness in the air, she stroked her chin. I cannot describe it well, to be honest. It feels like something big is going on behind the scene. Kiba frowned. Well, doesn't that sound ominous? He remarked. How about the fallen angels? They have been active around the area lately. As long as they are not causing trouble or making fuss that may cause another conflict between the factions, it's better to leave them be, Rhea shrugged. Then, she took a sip of the tea that was served to her by Kiba and raised one of her eyebrows after testing the beverage. Somehow, this tea tastes different. This tea tastes like cocoa, she commented. Ah, this is Yingdehong tea, but you, Kiba informed helpfully. If brewed right, it should have a cocoa-like aroma and a sweet aftertaste, he added. I see Rhea's muse before she took another sip of the tea. Tasty. Yamato Kaga spoke to her fellow Kanmusu, Yamato. They were currently in the classroom. Yamato was chatting with Issei when Kaga approached her. It was currently lunchtime. What is it, Kaga? Yamato said, looking at Kaga. Will it be alright if we talk for a while? Kaga asked. There is something that I'd like you to know. Yamato studied Kaga's stoic face for a while before she nodded. Very well, she said as she got up from her seat. She knew that whatever she wanted to tell her, it had to be something important. Issei, let's talk again later. I'd like to discuss about something with Kaga. Oh, sure, Issei said. Well, now that he had no one to talk to, it would be the time for him to talk with his fellow perverts, Mitsuda and Motohama. Yamato followed Kaga as they walked down the hallway before they went upstairs, going to the rooftop where they could have their own discussion without being interrupted. Even if there were other students at the rooftop, they were just minding their own businesses. When they arrived at the rooftop, Kaga turned to face the taller girl before she spoke. Do you know that there is one active Kanmusu here in this school? Yamato raised one eyebrow before she nodded. Yes, I know. I picked the signals sometime after the first time I came to this place. She scratched her cheek as she continued. I didn't inform Admiral regarding this matter because I was so focused on helping him to search for the ship fragments. I forgot to mention about this to him, she admitted sheepishly. That Kanmusu already made contact with our Admiral, Kaga informed, and Yamato gave Kaga an incredulous look. Really, when? Yamato asked. Last night, when Admiral went out of the house on his own. Because he looked like he wanted to be left alone, I did not accompany him, but I took the liberty of sending out reconnaissance planes and ferries to monitor him, Kaga said. While I might not be able to act immediately if he were to be attacked, I would be notified of such attack instantly. But that is not the main concern here. Last night, when Admiral went out on his own, he encountered this Kanmusu. He encountered this Kanmusu? Yamato said, parroting Kaga's words. Kaga nodded. They did exchange words, but she did not reveal her identity to him. She accompanied him home, and I was able to talk with her. Apparently, she had been active for a year. A year? What ship is she? Yamato asked. Aircraft carrier Akagi, Kaga said. Apparently, she materialized into her humanoid form before a beast tamer and was adopted by the beast tamer's family ever since. How could she survive her materialization? She was a victim of Midway, so she had to be deeply corrupted and became an abyssal. Yamato believed that Kaga's purification, despite how good it was a fluke. And being an abyssal would mean her existence would be unstable and would eventually die after rampaging. It happened that the beast tamers have their own methods of suppressing the corruption, Kaga said. I have to periodically cleanse myself in order to keep myself from relapsing, but the beast tamers seem to have some way to purify a corrupted Kanmusu much easier. So, you want to meet this beast tamer? Yamato asked. Yes, Kaga nodded. But, in order to do that, we need to inform Admiral about this first. But, considering that he is a pervert and apparently the beast tamer who adopted Akagi is a female, this matter needs to be handled delicately. There was a serious look on the shipgirl's face. It is safe to assume that the beast tamer who had adopted aircraft carrier Akagi is her admiral. If both our admirals were to establish contact, we have to do it right, she said, again with a serious look on her face. Ah, I see what you mean, Kaga. Yamato nodded. I understand. We do not want to make everything complicated due to our admiral's perverse nature. She folded her arms as she nodded again. But, in order to do so, we need to approach Akagi beforehand. We all need the confirmation regarding the purification method before we can arrange any meeting between our admirals. Does that sound fine with you, Kaga? Kaga nodded in affirmation. I have no problem with that. Still, we should not leave Admiral's side. But we still need to meet Akagi. Do you have any suggestions on how to accompany Admiral while at the same time establish contact with Akagi? Yamato thought about it for a while. Do you think reconnaissance planes would be enough to monitor Admiral's activities? Yes, I believe so, Kaga nodded. I believe that leaving him be for a while will not hurt. When Kaga said that, Yamato gave her a strange look as she narrowed her eyes. What is it, Yamato? No, it's nothing, Yamato said. It's just that when you said that, I couldn't help but feel something ominous. She was silent for a few seconds before she shook her head. No, it's probably just my imagination. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Aga did not make any comments about that before she spoke. Then, we shall commence our operation after school. Our objective is to establish contact with aircraft carrier Akagi to ensure whether we are able to safely allow our admiral to establish contact with the beast tamer who adopted Akagi or not. Oddly enough, despite the stoic look on Kaga's face, Yamato could hear the hint of giddiness in her fellow shipgirl's voice when she announced that they would be commencing the operation. She assumed that Kaga was excited over the prospect of commencing an operation, even though the operation was just a simple one, like making contact with a fellow shipgirl. After school, both Yamato and Kaga told Issei that they had something to do. Thinking that both Kanmusu might have made some friends at school, the perverted boy said he was okay with that and walked home. As soon as Issei left, Kaga discreetly deployed her planes and ferries to monitor Issei's movements before they went to find where tennis club was. After asking around, they finally got the direction of where the tennis club might be. So, both Kanmusu walked side by side towards the direction of the tennis club. Yamato, Kaga suddenly said as she walked alongside Yamato. The ponytailed shipgirl blinked as she glanced at the stoic-faced shipgirl. What is it, Kaga? Yamato asked. Well, she might get along with Kaga just fine. It's rare for the serious-looking shipgirl to actually initiate a conversation. You've been with Admiral for a long time, right? Kaga asked. Yamato tilted her head. Ah, yes, she was in her inert fragment form for a decade before her manifestation as a shipgirl. While she never interacted with him during that period, it could be said that she experienced most of the time together with Issei. Well, I didn't talk to him, but I could feel our connection every time we were together. There was a happy smile on Yamato's face as she recalled the time when Issei told himself that he would inherit the spirit of Yamato. As a ship, she represented the heart and soul of the nation. Despite the fact that she was sunken during the war, such a fact never changed. Yamato stopped walking and brought her hands to her chest, closing her eyes as she recalled her past together with Issei. Sure, she was incapable of talking or even interacting with Issei during that time, but she was still aware of everything when she was together with him. It made me feel happy. It was a strange feeling, but I didn't hate it. Kaga stared at Yamato's face for a while before she said, I see. She looked down before she added, that's nice. Then, she looked at Yamato's face again. I'm jealous. Huh? Yamato blinked, unsure whether she heard Kaga right or not. It's nothing. Let's continue, Kaga said before she continued walking. Yamato just followed her. As they walked, Kaga suddenly stopped. Yamato frowned. What's wrong, Kaga? Yamato asked. My reconnaissance planes picked some strange presences near Admiral, Kaga said. They don't seem to be ordinary presences. She turned around and faced Yamato. Shall we abort operation and go to attend our Admiral? Strange presences? Yamato furrowed her brow as she heard that from Kaga. Are those the fallen angels? She recalled the time when she rescued Issei from being killed by a fallen angel in the nick of time by materializing into her current humanoid form. Kaga seemed unsure. I do not know, but whatever they might be, we need to put Admiral's safety above all else. Let's go, she walked past Yamato, going to the opposite direction. Kaga, wait. Yamato followed the other shipgirl. They walked out of the school ground, leaving the school so that they could find Issei as soon as possible. From the reconnaissance planes that Kaga had deployed, Issei was followed or stalked by something. Both shipgirls could only hope that whatever it was, they would be able to make it to ensure Issei's safety. Issei was walking home alone because both Yamato and Kaga seemed to have something to do at school. He was fine with that because he assumed that both of them had made some friends at school. Both of them were free to do whatever they wanted because even though they were not humans, they were still people who had their own needs. He had told himself after a session of introspection at the park last night about what he wanted to do with the shipgirls he would find. He had already decided that all the Kanmusu were people, not some collectible items. Even though the idea of having a harem of Kanmusu was very appealing for a perverted boy like him, he also wanted to make them happy. The girls had suffered enough thanks to the war long ago. While he was unsure about what to do, he knew that someone had to do something to rescue these girls from their own darkness. Easier said than done, Issei muttered to himself. He believed himself to be a rather normal, if perverted boy. There was nothing special about him, no matter how much he wished otherwise. Still, if there's no one to do this, who else? He looked at his own palm before he clenched it into a fist. He had determined to do this. While he might not be able to do much, at the very least, he knew that there might be something that he could do. And he also had both Yamato and Kaga by his side, so even though he believed that he might be weak at the moment, with both of them by his side, he was sure that he could succeed. Alright, I've decided. Issei exclaimed. I'm gonna put it my all. I'm gonna save all the shipgirls. While he found out that it sounded strange when he said it out loud, he had already made it clear that he would do his best to reach his goal. Well, he still wanted to make a harem of Kamyusu. He wanted to do this because he wanted to save them from their sad fate. He was too preoccupied with his thought to realize that the street he was walking down was devoid of people. It took him a while to realize that the street was strangely empty. He started to have a bad feeling about this before he heard a familiar voice. Just hearing that voice was enough to send chills down his spine because he still could remember that voice taunting him a few days ago. My, you look so happy, Issei-kun. Did something good happen? That voice came from behind him. He slowly glanced over his shoulder and let out a choking noise when he saw a black-haired girl standing behind him. The girl was smiling sweetly despite the fact that her whole being was radiating malevolence. "Yuma-chan," Issei muttered. Yuma giggled when Issei called her. "Thank goodness you still can remember me, Issei-kun. I'm really glad." She covered her mouth with her hand daintily as she giggled. Issei could feel his heart beating faster inside his chest. It felt like his heart might end up bursting out of his ribcage at this rate. Just seeing the one who tried to kill him during his first date brought a myriad of emotions inside the boy. But the most prominent among those emotions was fear, and his fear towards this girl was enough to make him rooted on the spot, unable to move even a muscle. "What's wrong, Issei-kun? Are you afraid?" Yuma asked. Her voice still sounded sweet, but the way she looked at him was condescending. It felt like as if she was looking at a bug needed to be crushed underfoot. "Ah, no wonder you're afraid. You've got no one to protect you this time. That bitch with those enormous cannons isn't here to protect your sorry ass, after all." She laughed. How pitiful. Issei wanted to retort, but nothing came out of his mouth. He instinctively brought his hand to the talisman he wore, but he knew that it wouldn't be the same like before. Yamato wouldn't show up to save him this time. He was totally under Yuma's mercy, and he was sure that she wouldn't show him any. Now then, a spear of light appeared in Yuma's hand. "Let's get this over with, shall we? We're going to finish what we started, okay?" Her grin grew wider, which made her look more inhuman. Still holding the talisman, Issei still didn't move, or rather, was unable to move. Yuma twirled her spear of light a few times before he prepared to throw it at him. "Now, die." With that, Yuma threw the spear towards him. Still rooted on the spot where he was standing on, he just closed his eyes, waiting for the inevitable. In less than a second, he would die. But strangely, it didn't hurt. "What?" Issei could hear Yuma's voice shouting in surprise. He opened his eyes and saw a familiar-looking beehive-pattern barrier in front of him. The spear of light that Yuma threw at him earlier was on the ground, dissipating into nothingness. "This is." Issei looked at the barrier. "Yamato?" "Nope." There was a voice which was decidedly wasn't Yamato's before both Issei and Yuma heard the sounds of footsteps. Then, a person came into their views. It was a girl clad in pink dress, and she was smiling as she approached them. Issei recognized the girl. He met her last night at the park. When he tried to remember her name, Yuma glared at her. "Who the hell are you? How did you get through the barrier I made?" The girl with long dark brown hair giggled before she spoke. "Oh, I broke through. Sure, it might be able to stop people from entering, but it won't stop someone like me." Then, she looked at Issei. "Are you alright, Issei-kun? Did she hurt you?" I'm alright," Issei answered. He finally remembered her name. She introduced herself as Akagi. The girl, Akagi, smiled. "I'm glad." Then, she looked back at Yuma. "Now, what do we have here?" She studied Yuma's look. Yuma let out a growl as she conjured another spear of light. "A fallen angel, huh? It's my first time seeing one, to be honest." "Who the hell are you?" Yuma screamed, conjuring another spear. "Ah, where are my manners? My name is Akagi. I'm a second-year student at Kuo Academy. I'm a member of tennis club, and my hobbies are eating and archery." Then, she closed her eyes before her whole body glowed. For a moment, her pink dress vanished and was immediately replaced by a new attire, which consisted of a white guy and a red short hakama. She also wore a black muniate over her chest. Her clothing reminded Issei of Kaga's, only that Kaga's short hakama was blue, while hers was red. Her thigh-high stockings were white in color, while Kaga's were black. Yuma's eyes widened upon seeing the transformation. An archery bow materialized in Akagi's gloved right hand. "But, I suppose that is not important right now. As you can see, this boy is under my protection, and it won't do to have him harmed, especially by the likes of you." With her left hand, she conjured an arrow out of thin air. "I suggest you to withdraw. I have no intention in harming anyone right now." "DCH, shut the hell up." Yuma bellowed. "Who do you think you are, ordering me, Rainer, like that?" Akagi sighed. "It cannot be helped, then." She then spoke to Issei. "Will you stand behind me for a bit, Issei-kun? Things may get a little messy." As she said that, she knocked the arrow onto the bowstring before she drew the string of the bow back. "First Carrier Division, Akagi, sortie. First Carrier Division, Akagi, sortie." Akagi launched an arrow from her bow, firing it towards the fallen angel. Frantically, the fallen angel, Rainer, conjured a spear of light and used it to block the incoming arrow. The moment the arrow made contact with her spear, it released a bright flash that momentarily blinded her. Ah! Rainer stumbled back. Damn you. The moment when she began to recover, she saw another incoming arrow, which she barely blocked with her spear. Don't underestimate me, you bitch. Rainer yelled before she hurled her spear at Akagi. I don't underestimate you, fallen angel, Akagi said simply as she let her barrier block the incoming spear. It fell onto the ground before dissipating. I see you as a threat. Please kindly remove yourself from here immediately, or else I will have to do something more drastic for a threat like you. She knocked another arrow and drew the bowstring back. I won't allow you to harm Issei Hyoudou, no matter what. Rainer scrunched up her face and spat, don't tell me what to do. I'll finish what I started, and soon, Azazel-sama will shower me with his love and praises. I won't let you stand in my way, bitch. Well, I'm sorry that I have to keep standing in your way, then Akagi said. Then she released her arrow. Rainer braced herself for the incoming arrow, but she was surprised when the arrow went up instead of going straight to her. Then, it exploded and was replaced by 4 miniature aircrafts. They zoomed over to Rainer before dropping something. When Rainer realized that they were dropping bombs, she brought both her arms up, covering her face when they landed near her. The explosions that happened caused her to scream in both frustration and pain. Issei-kun, let's get away from here while she's distracted, Akagi said to Issei as she grabbed his hand. Hey, alright. Issei nodded and followed after the girl. He glanced over his shoulder to look at Rainer, who was trying to recover her bearing after having those bombs dropped around her. She did not realize that both of them were running away from her while she was distracted, but Akagi tugging him along, both of them escaped the area and went to a place which seemed safer. They began to see a few people, so Rainer wouldn't be able to mindlessly attack them if she were able to track them down. This should be far enough, Akagi said, still holding Issei's hand. Are you hurt, Issei-kun? No, I'm not. Issei shook his head. He felt that Akagi's hand was soft and warm when he touched it. Well, now that we're safe, let's take a walk, Akagi said. In a flash, her white guy and short red hakama reverted back into the pink dress that she wore earlier. For some reasons, the other passers-by didn't pay any attention to the shift. You don't mind if I continue holding your hand, do you? She held Issei's arm with both hands, and Issei could feel his arm squished between her breasts. It was such a euphoric feeling to have his arm wedged between Akagi's breasts, and Issei couldn't help but have a big grin plastered on his face. Oh my, do you like having your arm squeezed between my breasts, Issei-kun? Akagi giggled. You're such a perv, you know. It feels nice. Your boobs are the best, Akagi-san. Issei exclaimed. Akagi chuckled. I'm not sure how to respond to that, but I suppose I'm grateful to hear such a praise then. She let go of his arm. Now, I'm sure that you have a lot of questions to ask, Issei-kun. Questions? Oh, Issei looked down. Hey Akagi-san, are you the Kanmusu? Akagi guessed. Is that what you wanted to know? She waited for Issei's response and smiled when he nodded. Well, the answer is yes, I am a Kanmusu, just like both Yamato-san and Kaga-san. Do you know about them? Issei asked. Well, considering that their names are the names of the Japanese warships during the World War II era, with one of them being the famous Japanese battleship Yamato, it's hard not to make a connection, Akagi shrugged. Also, while Yamato-san and Kaga-san might never mention this to you, we Kanmusu are able to sense each other's presence. She tapped the side of her head. Radar, you see. We may seem like humans to you, but ultimately, we are simply the humanized ships. I see. Issei mused. But why did you save me? He asked. Because if I did not save you, both Yamato-san and Kaga-san would be sad, Akagi answered. Come on, Issei-kun. Let's pretend that we're a couple. If we blend in, that fallen angel won't be able to find us. She showed Issei a cheeky grin. And as my pretend boyfriend, you need to buy me, your pretend girlfriend, some foods. I can see a lot of food stalls around the park. She looked at one particular stall that was selling crepe. You don't mind, right? A date? Issei was too surprised to even say anything coherent. A while ago, he was threatened by his ex-girlfriend, and then he was saved by a girl who was actually a Kanmusu. Then, in order to hide themselves from his ex-girlfriend, they had to blend in by pretending to be a couple. And Issei noted that despite a rather whimsical attitude, this Akagi was actually fairly attractive, and like Yamato and Kaga, she was quite beautiful. Also, this is my first date, so from now on until it's over, please treat me kindly, Akagi said as she tugged Issei to the stall that she was looking earlier. Let's buy some food. This was quite a fast development for Issei, but he couldn't find it in himself to actually complain. He got to hang out with a pretty girl like Akagi, even if it's only a pretend, so that they could escape Rainer. Well, he's not going to let such a tiny detail hindering him from enjoying this date. And with Akagi with him, he wouldn't have to worry about getting himself ambushed by his ex-girlfriend. Still, if only he could protect himself, if only he could be stronger. Unnoticed by him, his left hand that was held by Akagi glowed a bit. The green glow disappeared before any of them could notice it. "Ah, this is heaven," Akagi exclaimed after taking a bite of her banana crepe. Issei bought it for her, and he also bought one for himself. Both of them looked like a couple as they walked alongside each other. Granted, it's only a pretend, but it's so that they could blend in with other couples in order to avoid being detected by Rainer, Issei's psychotic ex-girlfriend who happened to be a fallen angel. Issei smiled after munching on his crepe as he looked at Akagi. He knew that they were just pretending in order to stay safe, but it didn't stop him from being delighted. After all, Akagi was a beautiful girl, her eccentricity notwithstanding. In fact, her eccentricity made her look more appealing. Akagi-chan, thanks for coming to my rescue, Issei expressed his gratitude to Akagi as they walked. If you weren't there, I might have died already. Don't mention it, Issei-kun, Akagi said, smiling at him. I was there, so it's only natural for me to help you out. And both Kaga-san and Yamato-san would be sad if I were to leave you to die. Still thanks, Issei said. Then, he sighed. Still it's kinda frustrating, you know. He looked on his palm. If only I have enough power to defend myself, then you'd never have to risk yourself to rescue me. Akagi frowned. What do you mean, Issei-kun? I'm weak, Issei said. I already swore to save every single Kanmusu I can find, and yet I don't have enough strength to even protect myself. He balled his fist. He was angry at himself for being such a weakling. If only he could do something to defend himself, he wouldn't have to rely on others. While it's true that he was grateful for being saved, he couldn't help but feel bitter when he's the one who's often being rescued while having the shipgirls risking their lives for his sake. Are you going back on your words? Akagi asked. Issei looked at his pretend girlfriend. What do you mean? The things you told me last night, Akagi said. Didn't you promise that you will save the Kanmusu from their suffering? Didn't you swear that you will pull them out of the abyss of despair? Somehow, there was a flash of red in Akagi's dark brown eyes. Are you going to give them up? Issei stared into Akagi's eyes before he closed his eyes. Then, after taking a deep breath, he reopened them and said, no, I will not give up. Akagi smiled. I know that I'm weak right now, but I'll find some ways to improve myself, Issei said. Both Kaga-chan and Yamato-chan have great faith in me, and I won't let them down by giving up. He brought up his right hand, thumping it on his chest. I swear I will rescue them from their watery graves. He grinned. It's probably going to be difficult, but I will not give up. I'm glad to hear that, Akagi said, nodding her head a few times. You will make a very great admiral, Issei-kun. Issei laughed sheepishly as he heard that. Now, this should be far enough, Akagi said after observing their surroundings. Let's get out of this place while we still have our chance. That fallen angel won't be able to track us down at this rate, so we should be fine. It was fun hanging out with you, Issei-kun, she smiled at him. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, Issei said. He was a little disappointed that their date was almost over, but at least he was glad that Akagi was having fun with him. He still remembered Rainer's words when she revealed herself as a fallen angel who wanted to kill him, and it sure did a number to his confidence and self-esteem. As both of them walked down the street, Issei noticed something strange. Other people were nowhere to be seen as they continued walking further down the street. He could feel Akagi's hand tensing. It seemed that she also noticed that something weird was going on. Akagi-chan, Issei spoke to the Kanmusu. I made a severe miscalculation, Akagi said grimly. I led you here under the impression that the fallen angel was on her own. She let Issei's hand go. I did not consider the possibility of her bringing her companions along. Then Issei gulped before he heard the sounds of footsteps. Then, a figure revealed itself. It was a young girl clad in frilly Gothic Lolita dress. Despite her cute look, there was definitely something wrong with her. Got you, the young girl said, sticking her tongue out. A pair of black wings then emerged from her back. Before both Issei and Akagi could step back, they heard more footsteps before an adult woman showed up. Clad in a rather provocative outfit, she smiled as she licked her lips sensually. With the young girl standing in front of them and the adult woman standing behind them, they had nowhere to escape. Took you long enough to show up, then, a voice spoke before a middle-aged man clad in dark trench coat over a white dress shirt showed up. He adjusted his black fedora and said, well, I guess convincing Rainer to let us be stationed here was worth the effort. He held out his left hand, conjuring a spear of light. Kid, you better not take this personally. You're going to die here. And shortly after that, a figure dropped from above, landing in a crouching position, feet wide apart. It was Rainer, a little singed due to Akagi's attack earlier but otherwise uninjured. One hand was on the ground, supporting her weight before she picked herself up. Don't think you can escape us. She expanded her black wings and held out both hands, conjuring two spears of light. Then, she glared at Akagi. You will pay for humiliating me, bitch. I'll make your death as painful as possible. As for Akagi, she was no longer in her pink dress. Clad in a white guy and red hakama, with a black muniate covering her chest, she held out her hand, and her archery bow appeared. She then conjured an arrow. They were surrounded by 4 enemies, and because Issei was unable to do anything, she was on her own. As an aircraft carrier, she needed to have escorts while sailing. Despite her prowess in archery, she knew that ultimately, she's no match against all these murderous fallen angels. Issei-kun, I'll make an opening for you, Akagi told Issei as they stood back to back. Once I give you a signal, run as fast as you can. Despite the situation, she still managed to smile. Truth be told, I'm no match against them. I'm an aircraft carrier, remember? I cannot fight alone, but if I distract them, I'm sure you'll be able to escape. What? No. You can't do that. Issei protested. You'll die. That's unfortunate, but that's how it goes, Akagi sighed. Well, it's been a good time, living as a girl. She knocked the arrow on the bowstring and prepared to launch it. All the fallen angels surrounding them had already conjured their spears of light. Then, she launched the arrow. Instead of firing it at one of the enemies, she launched the arrow to the sky. That alone was enough to distract the fallen angels, and Akagi immediately shouted to Issei. Go. Having no choice, Issei obliged and ran as fast as he could. He ran past the young girl, shoving her, causing her to let out a yelp of pain. He mustered his strength into his legs as he ran. He gritted his teeth as he did so, cursing his weakness and inability to do anything in this kind of situation. Rainer, who realized that Issei managed to run away, shouted to the others, chase him. Then, she barreled over to Akagi, closing the distance between the two of them. Both her spears were primed at the Kanmusu, and she intended to skewer her with both. As for Akagi, she conjured 2 arrows in one hand. Instead of using her bow, she threw the arrows like darts at both the middle-aged man and the adult woman, who were about to chase after the fleeing Issei. Both of them were distracted by the arrows as they dodged them, which allowed Issei to run away even further. But that exposed Akagi to Rainer as she closed in with both spears in hands. Got you? Rainer shouted, skewering Akagi right on her back. The Kanmusu let out a pained scream when the spears of light protruded out of her chest, piercing through her muniate. With a sadistic grin on her face, Rainer twisted the spear, and the Kanmusu cried out in pain before the fallen angel pulled the spears out. Hearing Akagi's scream, Issei immediately stopped and looked behind. He was far enough, but he was able to see Akagi being stabbed by Rainer. Akagi? Without thinking, he spun on his heel and rushed back to where he came from. Akagi was hurt, and he needed to do something. Despite having 2 holes on her body, Akagi remained standing. Instead of blood, some kind of black liquid leaked out of those 2 holes. The Kanmusu also coughed up the same liquid. Still, she remained standing. But Rainer wasn't done. She grabbed a fistful of Akagi's hair before she slammed her head against the ground. Due to her strength as a fallen angel, it was enough to break the ground when she slammed Akagi's head against it. As for Issei, before he could reach them, the young girl that he shoved aside earlier slammed her body against his. The force of her tackle was enough to send him back flying. When he was on the ground, the young girl landed on him, straddling him. Somehow, he was unable to get up when she was sitting on top of him. Now this is what you get for standing in my way. Rainer stepped on Akagi's wound, causing her to scream some more. Akagi was lying face down when Rainer did that. How do you like it, You like it, don't you? Here, have some more. She stomped on the wound again, and the downed Akagi let out an agonized scream. No, no, no. Leave her alone. Issei cried out. Due to the young girl sitting on top of him, he was unable to see Akagi being tortured by Rainer, but he was able to hear her screams. Be a good boy and stay quiet, Issei-kun, Rainer purred as she spoke to Issei in sweet voice. Your turn will be next, so stay put for a while, okay? Then, she looked down on the one she was currently torturing. Now, let's end this. Holding a spear of light in one hand, she lifted the spear, aiming to stab Akagi right in on the back of her head. Issei was unable to do anything when he heard the sound of the spear piercing through Akagi's head. He couldn't see it, but the sound alone was enough for him to know what happened to the Kanmusu. No, not her, Issei muttered. Why? Chuckling, Rainer left the spear that pinned Akagi's head on the ground as she approached Issei. Now what should I do to you? The young girl got up before she forced him to his knees. The middle-aged man and the adult woman restrained him as he did so. In that position, Issei was able to see Akagi's prone form lying on the ground, with a spear sticking out the back of her head. Issei glared at Rainer. You killed her. Rainer said, shrugging. What did you think I'd do to her? Befriend her? Then, she stroked Issei's cheek in loving manner before she giggled. Now, Issei-kun, you've been quite a problematic child to us. If only you could just accept your death, then this sort of thing might have never happened. You'll pay for this, Issei growled. I swear I'll make you pay. Rainer laughed. And how will you do that? You're weak. You're worthless. But with your death, Azazel-sama will notice my accomplishment and he will shower me with praises that I deserve. After stroking Issei's face, Rainer conjured a spear in one hand. Now let me repeat my question. Smiling sweetly, she said, will you die for me? Before Issei could respond to that, a voice spoke. Dying is usually inconvenient, so I figure he may refuse. Huh? Rainer glanced over her shoulder and gasped when she saw Akagi standing on her feet. Her spear was still pierced through Akagi's head before the Kanmusu grabbed the shaft of the spear with her hand. In one fluid motion, she pulled it out and tossed it aside. How? Rainer stared at Akagi in disbelief. Despite being stabbed through her head, Akagi was still alive. How are you still alive? Smiling, Akagi replied, it takes more than a spear in the head to sink a ship, you know. She brought her hand to the gaping wound on her head. Still, it's giving me a headache. I think I'm starting to hallucinate now. Turning to face Akagi, Rainer shouted, still, you can't hope to match me. Are you sure? Akagi tilted her head. Well, you better start minding your head now. Huh? What the hell are you talking about? Before she could finish, she was hit by an exploding arrow on the side of her head. Well, the arrow didn't stab her through her head, the explosion that occurred when it collided against the side of her head was enough to send the fallen angel reeling. The other fallen angels looked at where the arrow came from and they saw a girl holding a bow. Like Akagi, she also wore a white guy with a black muniate covering her chest. She wore a blue hakama instead of the red one like Akagi's. Standing beside her was another girl with massive cannons, and all of them were aimed at the fallen angels. Kaga-chan Yamato-chan. Issei was relieved to see them both. Then he suddenly was whisked away by Akagi, who then ran over to both Kaga and Yamato. Despite her grievous injuries, she was still able to move, though there was a noticeable gait when she moved. DKH groaning, Rainer shook her head. Her head was covered in soot due to the explosion earlier. Give it up, Yamato said as she looked at the fallen angels sternly. If you wish to keep your bodies whole and intact, please kindly remove yourself from this place. If you refuse to comply, I, Yamato, shall personally have every single one of you destroyed. DRR throwing the shipgirls one last glare, Rainer shouted to her fellow fallen angels. Donaseek. Kalawerner. Middled. We're leaving. And with that, she flew away, leaving her black feathers scattered. The others followed after her, leaving the area. Seeing that the fallen angels had left, Kaga immediately dropped her bow and rushed to Akagi's side. Akagi-san. She gasped when she saw how severe Akagi's wounds were. This is bad. She needs to get herself docked immediately. Kaga-san. Akagi looked at Kaga. Haha, are you worried about me? Then, she fell on her knees. NGH. Akagi's body trembled as she brought her hands to her head. It's coming. Akagi cried out as she clutched on her head. What's wrong? Panicking, Issei shouted. No, no. No. Akagi cried as she fell to the ground. Keep them away from me. Akagi-san. Kaga tried her best to calm the Kanmusu down. Gray ghost. Akagi muttered. She's here. No, she's here. I can see her. She wants to kill me just like she did to others. She's recalling some past events. I assume it's the Battle of Midway, Yamato said, also trying her best to calm Akagi down. Gray ghost. Kaga's expression hardened. USS Enterprise. She spat out the name in distaste. Issei, being a warship otaku, recognized that name. USS Enterprise was one of the most decorated US warship of World War II. Due to her exploits during the war, she was infamously nicknamed the Grey Ghost by the Japanese. Akagi-san. Kaga spoke to the trembling Akagi. Calm down, she's not here anymore, she said as she rubbed Akagi's back tenderly. Scuttled. Akagi muttered some more. I'm going to be scuttled. No, put the torpedo launchers away, Makis, Hajikas. She began to sob. Please don't scuttle me. No. No. Please, I don't want to die. What should we do? Yamato asked. We can't just leave her like this. It seems that we have no choice. Kaga sighed. We need to come into contact with her admiral. Her admiral? Issei blinked in bemusement. Yes, her commanding officer. Kaga nodded to Issei. Just like us who have you as our admiral, Akagi-san also has her own admiral. We need to bring her there. Still, we don't know who her admiral is, Yamato said. But that's the only choice we have, Kaga reasoned as she glanced at Akagi, who's mumbling incoherently while trembling on the ground. She will break down completely if left unattended. Then, Yamato perked her head up. I sense a presence. Fallen angel. Kaga immediately picked up her bow. No, it's not a fallen angel. Yamato closed her eyes, trying to concentrate on the presence she detected via her radar. It's a horse. Horse. Kaga frowned. Then they heard the sounds of a horse whinnying before they saw a black horse coming to their way. Three of them blinked, not expecting to see a horse at that moment. Luckily, no people were around them when the horse appeared. There were two people on the horse. One of them was an armored figure who was somehow lacking a head. The other one was a schoolgirl who immediately dismounted and rushed over to Akagi. Akagi-chan. The schoolgirl exclaimed. Oh gosh, this is bad. She took out something from her pocket. It was a talisman that was almost exactly like the one Issei wore around his neck. Here, hold this. When Akagi held the talisman, her body suddenly glowed before she disappeared. What happened to her? Issei asked. She's returning to her true body, which is this, the schoolgirl showed Issei the talisman. This talisman contains the shard of aircraft carrier Akagi. Let's just say she's currently in hibernation mode. She'll be fine, I tell you that. Okay. Issei then looked at the schoolgirl's face. By the way, who are you? He asked. He noted that she was quite busty and her curly hair was brown in color. I'm glad you asked, the schoolgirl beamed happily. By the way, it's my pleasure to finally meet you, Battleship Yamato, aircraft carrier Kaga, she said to the shipgirls who were with them. Yamato, I'm glad to meet you as well, Yamato replied to her awkwardly. Likewise, Kaga bowed her head. But who might you be? Sorry that I forgot to introduce myself, the schoolgirl said apologetically. My name is Kiyomabe, and I am Akagi's admiral. Nice to meet you. Issei sat on the couch, nervously fidgeting as he glanced at both Yamato and Kaga who were sitting next to him. A while ago, they arrived at Abe residence after following Kiyomabe, who arrived at the scene riding a horse reined by a headless guy. Now, the three of them were in the guest room where they were waiting for Kiyom to show up. Admiral? Yamato asked, looking concerned as she looked at Issei. Is something wrong? Oh well, I'm worried, Issei admitted, his head drooping. I hope Akagi-chan's alright. He clenched his fists as he placed them on his knees. Kaga wordlessly looked at her admiral, her expression unreadable, but she seemed to be bringing her hand onto his shoulder, as if trying to comfort her. She immediately lowered her hand when Kiyom showed up, bringing tea and snacks for them. Sorry for the wait. Kiyom announced as she brought the tray before placing it on the table. It took me a while, but Akagi-chan is alright now. Really, Issei exclaimed, looking visibly relieved after learning that Akagi was fine. Kiyom nodded. Yep. A Kanmusu is very durable because they are the personifications of warships from the past. Technically, they can even survive beheading. The only way to completely destroy a Kanmusu is to totally annihilate them. Issei was astonished to learn about that. He looked at both Yamato and Kaga, imagining them still walking despite the lack of heads, and he decided to drop the matter because it was just too disturbing. Putting that aside, can we see Akagi-chan now? I want to thank her, and he paused as he unclenched his fists. I want to apologize to her for trying to run away. Issei, Kaga said. This time, she didn't hesitate to bring her hand onto his shoulder, comforting him. It's not your fault, Issei Naichin. All four of them heard a new voice before someone came into view. It was Akagi. But there was something different about her. Kaga was at a loss for words as she stared at Akagi, her cheeks turning red for some reason. Hey Akagi-chan? Is that you? Issei asked in disbelief, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. As for Yamato, she seemed to comprehend what was going on. Akagi giggled to herself as she scratched the back of her head, winking her right eye as she stuck out her tongue. I'm sorry I caught you off guard, everyone. And I'm sorry I made you worry, Issei Naichin. Akagi seemed to shrink in size and looking younger. Instead of wearing her usual shipgirl getup, she was wearing a simple yukata. It felt like she was 10 years younger. Well, you see, her body was grievously damaged and a simple bath won't do to heal her. So, we had no other choice but repair her body through this means, Kiyom explained as she beckoned Akagi to come closer to her. The small Akagi trotted towards Kiyom and sat on her lap. Patting the diminutive shipgirl, Kiyom continued, she'll revert back to normal in no time, though. All she needs to do is to eat and sleep a lot. I'm still a growing young lady. Akagi nodded. I see. Issei said uncertainly. But why are you calling me Naichin? Akagi crossed her arms and huffed. Why shouldn't I? I'm a little kid right now, of course I'm gonna call you Naichin, Issei Naichin. Oh okay. Issei conceded. Then, he smiled. Still, I'm so glad you're alright, Akagi-chan. I thought you were dead. If only I were strong enough. He then looked down, crestfallen as he remembered that time when Akagi was mortally wounded by those fallen angels. Akagi looked at Issei before she hopped off of Kiyom's lap. She trotted towards where Issei was sitting before she stood before him. She cupped him by his cheeks, and the two of them were looking into each other's eyes. You're strong, Issei Naichin. Instead of running away, you returned back and tried to help me. It takes a special kind of strength to face danger for the sake of other people, Akagi said, smiling warmly at the boy. There's no wonder Yamato Naichin and Kaga Naichin have you as their admiral. Yamato nodded, smiling in agreement. Of course. That sounds like Issei to jump into danger unthinkingly. Kaga also smiled. While I do not condone recklessness, the way Admiral is willing to put himself in harm's way just to help others is simply admirable. Though I wish he can rely on us more. Issei blushed when both shipgirls complimented him. Then, Akagi trotted back towards Kiyom and sat back onto her lap. Snuggling against her sister figure, she clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. So, I believe there's something important that you want to talk about here, Akagi began. To be honest, I never thought I'd see other Kanmusu showing up here. So, I'm sure Kiyom Naichin is willing to help you guys. Ah, yes. We've been looking for you, Dono. Yamato said, addressing the girl who was patting Akagi's head. We are looking for someone who can help us deal with the grudge that are tainting our beings. She gestured at Kaga. Due to Midway, Kaga still has to live with her grudge, and we have to make sure that we can deal with it in the future. I see, Kium said. Well, there's no reason for me to refuse. After all, you guys are Akagi-chan's friends. She stroked Akagi's hair, and the little shipgirl seemed to be enjoying the attention Kium was giving her. Akagi-chan here still has a little bit of abyssal taints left in her, so we have to periodically cleanse her through some ceremonies and rituals. Kaga nodded. If these ceremonies and rituals can help me suppress my grudge, then I'm willing to undergo through them. You have my gratitude, Dono. Don't worry about it, Kium said. So, besides the purification ceremonies, what else do you want from me? Since we're in this together, feel free to ask for my help. We don't really want to bother you, but if you insist, Abe-senpai, Issei said, bowing to Kium. Oh, stop calling me that, Issei-kun. Just Kium is fine, Kium said in friendly manner. Well, if you're willing to help, then thanks, Issei said, grinning sheepishly. So, they enjoyed their tea as they talked about themselves. Kium told everyone that her family was a clan of beast tamers for generations. Oh, there's something I'd like to show you, Kium said as she got up from her seat while Akagi got herself off of her lap. She went towards a drawer at the corner of the guest room before she took out a box. As a family of beast tamers, we were already aware of the existence of Kanmusu for long, but Akagi-chan is the only active Kanmusu we have here. Both Yamato and Kaga watched Kium curiously as she placed the box on the table. We have located many shards of warships and collected them here, but we couldn't summon them for some reasons, Kium said as she opened the box, revealing a bunch of steel shards. Both Yamato and Kaga looked at them with fascination. I can feel them, Yamato said. You have collected about 30 of them. Kium nodded. Yup. And no one besides Akagi-chan here responded to my call. It was weird. So, you want us to perform the summoning ceremony? Kaga asked. Yup. Kium nodded again. And I think Issei-kun will make a suitable admiral for them. Eh? Issei blinked in confusion as all eyes were on him. Let's see, Yamato said as she checked on the shards. There are quite a lot of them. What do you think, Admiral? She asked Issei. Can you tell which ships they are? Issei asked as he looked at the shards. All of them looked identical, but for some reasons, he could tell that each of them possessed the spirit of the ships from the past. We can, but it will take us a while. Would you like to choose one for the summoning ceremony? Yamato asked again. Well, I guess trying to pick one at random won't hurt, Issei shrugged. Then, he took one of the shards at random. Let's try this one. Aga studied the shard that Issei picked before she nodded to herself after identifying it. Admiral, it is the shard of a destroyer named Murakumo. Would you like to summon her? Why not? Issei shrugged. Still, shouldn't we do this somewhere open? I mean, there's a chance that she's going to go berserk after showing up. Ah, yes, Yamato nodded. She sunk during the war, after all. As an otaku of warships, Issei knew about the history of Murakumo. During the war, she was bombed by enemy aircraft and was then scuttled. Like Kaga, there was a chance that she might emerge as her corrupted abyssal self. You can do this outside, Kium said, well aware of the danger an abyssal might pose. Still, it's up to you guys. We can do nothing but watch for the time being. After all, Akagi-chan here is still recuperating. Akagi pouted when Kium told her that she wouldn't be fighting if the abyssal showed up. But she reluctantly agreed that she couldn't do much in her current form. So, they went to the backyard where they could safely perform the summoning ceremony. Both Yamato and Kaga had already summoned their gears, with Yamato preparing her cannons and Kaga her archery bow. Issei stood behind them as he watched the fairies doing the dancing ritual around the shard anxiously. As for Kium and Akagi, they watched the ceremony from a distance, with the beast tamer sitting on a chair and hugging Akagi who was sitting on her lap. I can sense it, Kaga said, her arrow materialized out of thin air. The cloud of abyss is circling around the shard. Please stay behind us, Admiral. The battle is imminent. Issei gulped as he continued watching the ritual. Then, the fairies stopped dancing as they immediately poofed out of existence. Black smoke emerged from the ground where the shard was placed. It's coming. Brace yourself. Yamato said as she primed her cannons at the shard. Soon, a figure started to materialize. It was a pale-skinned girl, clad in tattered clothes. She seemed to be holding a spear in her hand. I won't forgive you. Covered in black smoke, the corrupted shipgirl growled, glaring at both Yamato and Kaga with her red glowing eyes. The ground under her feet started cracking and in the sky, dark clouds seemed to appear out of nowhere. Reality itself is rejecting her presence, Kaga said. Remember, if any of our plans don't work, then we have no other choice but to destroy her. Issei gritted his teeth. He made a promise to himself to save the Kanmusu from darkness, and he'd rather not see any of them being destroyed. We'll do our best to keep her contained, Yamato promised. The corrupted Kanmusu trembled as more dark smoke emerged from her being. Her movement seemed unnatural, and the cracking sound she made each time she moved indicated how wrong she was as an existence. Then, she summoned 2 cannons from her arms, priming them at both Yamato and Kaga. "Here she comes." Kaga bellowed, preparing herself to launch her arrow. The corrupted Kanmusu roared as she let loose her shots, and both Yamato and Kaga summoned their barriers, protecting themselves and their admiral from the incoming shells. In retaliation, Kaga shot her arrow, which transformed into miniature planes, while Yamato let loose a volley of shells at the abyssal. "I won't forgive you." "That's right, I won't." "So, you saw them fighting fallen angels?" Rias asked as she looked at Kaneko, and the white-haired girl nodded. "Yes. The barrier got in my way, but I saw the battle," Kaneko reported. "There were explosions, but in the end, no one died. I believed I saw Issei Hyoudou in the midst of the battle as well, but I couldn't see his role in that battle. When the battle was over, Abe-senpai showed up riding with a Dullahan. I decided to let my familiar continue with the observation." "I see. Good work," Rias said, smiling at Kaneko. "Now there's no doubt that something serious is going on in my territory, and there's no way I can let it slide." She crossed her arms under her ample bust. "And for the fallen angels to suddenly show up and do whatever they like," she sighed. "This is a delicate matter, considering there's this truce going on. We don't want an all-out war happening here, so what do you suggest we do, Butchu?" Kiba asked as he poured a cup of tea for Kaneko. The white-haired girl sipped the tea, and she seemed to be enjoying the taste. "For the time being, observe the fallen angels first," Rias decided. "Well, the deal about Yamato Hyoudou and Kaga Yamamoto is an important matter. The presence of fallen angels in my area is a more pressing matter at the moment. Still, keep up with your observation, Kaneko. We still need to figure out about their deal, after all." Taking a bite of her snack, Kaneko nodded. After she finished, Rias decided to mull over the new information that she had received from Kaneko's report. She had learned about the presence of fallen angels here in her territory, and with Kuo being under her jurisdiction, it was her responsibility to make sure that nothing serious would happen in the future. "What's on your mind, Butchu?" Kiba asked as he poured Rias a cup of tea. "Well, I'm worried," Rias said before she took a sip of her tea. "Many things happen behind our backs, and we can only focus on one thing at a time. Perhaps I should ask Kiyam about her involvement. She's probably a beast tamer, but she's still a human." She set down her cup on the saucer. "The Abe clan has a neutral stance about the conflict between the biblical factions, right?" Kiba asked. "So, unless if something changed without us knowing it, we shouldn't worry too much about them for the time being." Rias sighed as she massaged her temple. "I guess you're right, Hyoudou. By the way, have you seen Akeno?" She asked as she looked around the clubhouse to see any sign of the black-haired girl. "I heard that Himejima-senpai has something important business to do back home," Kiba informed. "Not sure what this business is, though. I thought she told you about it, Butchu." Rias sighed again. "Sometimes, I don't know what Akeno is thinking about." "Well, if it's something important, it's not my place to pry." Kiba nodded. "I guess you're right, Butchu." Right after that, Kaneko held out her empty cup. "More tea, please?" Kaneko asked. The battle raged on at the backyard of Kiyam's house. Unlike Kaga's abyssal form, this particular abyssal was leaner and smaller, and she was capable of moving fast, dodging shots from both Yamato and Kaga. Kiyam winced when she saw another crater on the ground, and both Kanmusu gave the beast tamer an apologetic glance before continuing the fight. Hate, 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 hate all of you." The abyssal roared as she shot at both Yamato and Kaga, and the two of them blocked the shots with their barriers. "Fire." Yamato shouted as she fired a shell towards the abyssal, and the shell pierced through her barrier, hitting her at her torso. "Urgh." The abyssal grunted in pain. But she didn't stop moving as she continued firing at both Kanmusu. "I hate all of you." Her glowing red eyes were piercing that Issei reeled back from their sheer intensity. Their plan was for both Yamato and Kaga to incapacitate her so that Issei could reach out to her. But so far, they had yet to take her down, and it was too dangerous for Issei to approach her. "She's moving too fast," Yamato said. "My cannons cannot target her properly. Perhaps we should get closer and engage her in close-quarter combat," Kaga suggested. "We still can do that, but we don't know what will happen if we approach her," Yamato argued. "Still, if we have no other choice, then it's the only way to deal with her." As both Yamato and Kaga continued engaging the abyssal, Issei remained behind them, watching as they traded shots and blocked each other's attacks. He clenched his fists, silently cursing his uselessness. "Damn it, why can't I do anything?" Issei cursed inwardly. "I promised to save them all from darkness, and yet I'm still weak. Do you desire power?" Issei blinked when he heard a voice out of nowhere. "Wah? Who's there?" he shouted, and both Yamato and Kaga glanced over their shoulders to look at him. "Admiral, what's wrong?" Yamato asked. But, as their attentions were diverted from her, the abyssal saw an opportunity to attack one particular target. Grinning madly, she suddenly sprinted towards Issei. Wielding her spear, she went to tackle the boy down onto the ground. Ah! Issei cried out as he was tackled down onto the ground and the abyssal straddled him, one hand holding her spear and the other clamping on his throat. I got you now. Die. Issei. The abyssal aimed to stab Issei in his face and he brought his hand in his attempt to block the attack. For a while, his vision turned green and it felt like everything around him seemed to slow down in speed. Crack. When he opened his eyes, Issei saw the dumbfounded expression on the abyssal's face as she held onto her broken spear. He swore that the spear hit him at his arm and somehow, the spear broke upon impact. Let go of him. Yamato yelled as she swung her parasol to the side of the abyssal's body, sending her flying. She landed a distance away from them and Kaga continued bombarding her with her miniature planes. Arg. Hate you. Hate all of you. Unable to block any of the attacks, the abyssal was hit again and again. Then, they stopped and the abyssal was lying on the ground, groaning in pain. Alright, this is our chance, Admiral Yamato informed Issei. Try to reach out for her. If it fails, then we have no choice but to scuttle her. Gulping, Issei got back up onto his feet before he approached her. The abyssal was on the ground, mumbling hateful words as she struggled to get back up. Issei started awkwardly, trying to reach out to her head. The abyssal had white hair which was covered in soot and burn marks thanks to the bombardments that she took earlier. Fate won't forgive you never. Issei just looked at the pitiful state the abyssal was in. He tried to come up with something and after thinking for a while, he spoke to her. Do you really hate us? That question made the abyssal stop her hateful rant. Because it hurts never forgive. Hurt? Issei frowned. Then, he remembered the circumstances of her being sunk during the war. She was scuttled after being bombed. Was it because of you being scuttled? Never forgive. Hate tried to save them but was scuttled instead. It hurts. Her words were filled with grief and Issei gritted his teeth as he saw the vision of a young girl sinking into the sea, her mind filled with hateful words to her allies and the world as she sank into oblivion. Refusing to let her sink even down further, he grabbed onto her hand, clasping them tight with both of his. It's alright. No one's going to hurt you now. Issei told her. Do not let your hatred consume you. Tightening his hold onto her hand, he continued, and if you want to keep holding onto that hatred, I'm willing to take it. From now on, your grief, your pain, your hatred you're sharing them with me now. I'm willing to shoulder them for you. The abyssal looked at Issei in stunned silence. Slowly, the red glow in her eyes faded. While her eyes were still red, Issei saw no hatred in them. All that left was relief and comfort. Then please take responsibility, idiot. Her tattered clothes disintegrated, leaving behind her naked body, which also gained normal complexion. Issei couldn't help but look at her figure, which was then enveloped in bright light before dissipating into nothingness. Knowing that his task was done, Issei got back up onto his feet and there was the shard right next to his feet. He picked it up and held it in his palm. Yeah, I'll take responsibility, Murakumo. No need to worry, Issei said, holding the shard close to his chest. Now that the battle was over, both Yamato and Kaga rejoiced and they approached Issei to make sure that he was not injured. Meanwhile, Kiyomi just sighed as she watched her wrecked courtyard, with Mini Akagi patting her back, or at least trying to due to her diminutive height, she ended up patting her butt instead. It took them the rest of the day, but the courtyard was fixed thanks to the effort of everyone. Now that everything was in order, it's about time for them to properly summon Murakumo this time. 2 fairies clad in Maiko Getup were summoned and they did the summoning ritual around the shard. Everyone watched as the fairies performed the ritual and soon, there was a bright light before a figure materialized before them. The figure took her first breath as she adjusted her footing. Before them was a young girl clad in one-piece sailor fuku dress and black tights. There were also a pair of strange devices floating at the upper sides of her head. She was holding a spear in her right hand and when she saw Issei, she turned around and faced him. Special type destroyer, 5th ship Murakumo, the Kanmusu introduced herself, sporting a neutral expression. Then, she put her hand on her hip as she continued studying Issei. So, you're the commander, huh? You better try your hardest, then. Bright-eyed, Issei nodded happily and said, welcome abroad, Murakumo-chan. Hope we can get along just fine. HMPH Murakumo crossed her arms under her modest chest. Well, you better work hard, commander. From now on, I shall serve you as your ship. Murakumo seemed to be sporting an indifferent look, but there was a small smile on her face. You look so cool, Murakumo-chan. Issei said, studying the newly summoned Kanmusu from all angles. You have small tits, though, but that's alright. I'm sure you'll do just fine here alongside Yamato-chan and Kaga-chan. Murakumo's eyebrow twitched. Oh my, Yamato smiled nervously as she placed her hand on her cheek. What a perv, Kaga muttered, crossing her arms under her ample chest. Yeah, make you eat these oxygen torpedoes. Meanwhile, Kiyomi and Akagi were watching from sideline. Akagi was eating a croissant as she watched Issei interacting with his new shipgirl, who was chasing after him while holding her spear. They get along just fine, right? Kiyomi said, also eating a croissant. Yeah, they do. Akagi nodded. Say, Akagi-chan. Kiyomi spoke to the diminutive shipgirl. Are you sure you're fine with that? I mean, I'm fine with whatever decision you made, but aren't you going to think this through? Akagi smiled at Kiyomi. I've made up my mind, Nichan. Once I'm back to normal, I'd like to become one of Issei Nichan's Kamyusu. End of the here. So that's it for today's video guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends. Bye.